Welcome to the Honest Mamas podcast, where we talk about the emotional and spiritual aspects of the motherhood journey. We are a team of honest mamas. Myself, Melissa, Sophie, and Claire. We are psychotherapists, moms, and friends. Join us as we get real about the topics that matter to you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 46 of the Honest Mamas podcast. This is Melissa, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Brook Nalle, sleep consultant and founder and owner of Sleepy on Hudson. Today we talk all about your baby and sleep. This is such an important topic and one of the few that moms, including myself, can and have stressed over. Do we sleep train, cry it out, co-sleep? You know the overwhelm this comes with. I hired Brooke for both my kids, and her approach and gentle and understanding stance was just what we needed to help us find our way through sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Today, I'm hoping my conversation with her will help you too. Let's get started with my conversation with Brook Nalle from Sleepy on Hudson. Brooke, I am so thrilled that you're on our show today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for including me.
You're more than welcome. So I thought we'd dive right in because I can tell you our listeners are probably desperate for this topic. And while we're not, going to tell you exactly how to sleep train your child or not sleep train your child, I definitely think our conversation is going to help a lot of people with their children and sleep.
Great. And I love how you said we're not going to talk how to do it, just because everybody needs such a unique answer that's based on who they are, who their child is. So I'm glad that you said that's not what we're chatting about today. That feels great to me.
Awesome. Great. So let's just start. You see a lot of new parents with babies, and I'm curious from your perspective, what do you see as the most common sleep issue that you hear about?
I would say the most common sleep issue is that the excitement or nerves or general energy of being a new parent starts to wear off. And also the visitors and the help starts to fade away. And this feeling of permanence takes over. And you look at your situation and think, I don't know if I can sustain this.
I'm smiling because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Exactly. And I was just going to say what also happens is you start to meet a few more parents and you start to hear other people's situations and you start the comparing and contrasting. Or I once had a colleague say windows and mirrors. And so you're looking out and seeing what other people do, and then you're looking at yourself and saying, I'm failing. So that's a pretty common thread that I see.
And do you see, couples, when you think about meeting a couple, and obviously a lot of people have babies without being in a couple, but for this conversation in this moment, when you walk into someone's home or you do, phone consultations or things like that, do you notice that a lot of couples are on the same page around sleep? Do you sense that they've talked about it before? Do you sense that they're just stressed out and arguing with each other? Like, what is your general picture?
I would say that the majority of people that I work with, by the time they contact me, are together and that they need help. I think the disconnect comes from how help will work and expectations. I think there's usually one partner who thinks, okay, we've hired somebody, the problem will be fixed. And the other partner might say, listen, this is a process and it's not going to take a night or two. So that's where it can be frustrating. Every now and then I do work with a family where one partner is desperate for change and the other thinks it's just fine. And it's not always a male-female dynamic or a nursing parent, non-nursing parent dynamic. I see it coming in both different directions.
I was just about to say, whichever partner is sleeping,
Right.
not mentioning any names, but
Right.
I was thinking, well, of course they're fine with it. They're sleeping through the night. And the other person, again, not mentioning any names, is not. But it's good to hear that it does come from both sides.
Yes, it does. And then what I also find is that sometimes the parent For example, I'm thinking of a family I worked with over the summer, two moms, and there was one mom who was nursing all night long and loved it. And she loved that time, didn't think that anything was wrong with that, and would do it forever, in her words. And her partner said, "Hey, I miss my wife. I don't like this setup. I'm kicked out of the bed and I want to change." So I also am getting more and more of that in my practice.
And it does become, I can see in that example that it becomes like, how are the parents going to team up? Like they really need to be a solid team, because
Yes,
if the one wife is saying, "Hey, this is a problem for me," or one partner is saying that, you have to take that seriously.
definitely. Definitely.
So going back, if we were to kind of answer the question that I'm sure, maybe some listeners are sitting with, how do you even know if you should hire someone like you? I mean, let's just say if you have someone like you in your area, or if you don't, I'm sure you do phone consultations and things like that too. So how do people know if they need a sleep consultant?
I would say if you're somebody who wants the answer that is right, exactly right for them, and you've tried to do it for yourself and you're not getting the right answer or you're getting confused, then it's important to reach out to somebody. There are experts, and this is a very tricky subject. And most people who I work with have tried something on their own or had a girlfriend who said, "Hey, this worked for me. Why don't you try it?" And they've done it. But if you feel that you keep hitting a wall, or if you also know and you kind of identify with, "I'm somebody who needs to be given a recipe," or "I'm somebody who needs to work out with a trainer," or have a very important hands-on mentor in my work environment. If that is your personality trait, then I suggest finding somebody who can help you with this.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of the, moms that have read like 50,000 sleep books,
Yes.
myself included. And every book says, cry it out, don't cry it out, leave them, go in on the first try, back out slowly, co-sleep. I mean, all these different messages that we're bombarded with. And not only is it just, kind of the recipe, but then it's also like, oh, I must be a terrible parent because I let my child cry it out, or I didn't let my child cry it out, or there's just so much kind of, in a way, there's so much sustenance for beating yourself up as a mom when it comes
Yeah.
to sleep.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it used to just be the books. My son is 13. And back in my day, there were only the books and the advice at the playground. And in the past 10 years, I've seen a huge spike in online comments, online advice, social media, the rabbit hole of Google. And you not only are getting the books and your friends, but now you're getting blog posts shared with you and chat rooms and Facebook groups that can be so confusing and overwhelming.
And I'm sure family has a voice in that too.
Oh, yes. That's a good point.
So when we talk about, because I have used you in the past, I have hired you twice before for two different children. I definitely have a sense of how you work. And what I love about the way you work, number one, is that you always fit your program or ideas to really sit with what the parents are saying versus like, this is a one, mark representation and this is what we do for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love that. The other thing is that anything that parents can kind of sit with or mull over in terms of what's developmentally appropriate for their children. I think there's a lot of, when fear and guilt come up, I think that's a lot of it is like, are they ready? How do we know they're ready? How are they developing? Is it okay? So anything you would say around that?
Yeah. I think what I would say is you're never going to be at the point where you feel 100%. I rarely hear from somebody who says, "I'm doing this. I just tell me what to do. I'm jumping in." And it happens from time to time, but it is pretty rare. And you're always going to have that trickle of doubt that runs through you. And that's why I think it's so important in the majority of programs that I offer. It's the support. It's the back end where I really put my work in, because I can give you a plan, Melissa, but as you know, when you have questions, that's when you start to get the I don't know, the guilt or the confusion or that little voice in your head says, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. And so it's so important to have an expert that you can turn to and say, this is what happened last night. How do I handle this? So most mornings I wake up and I spend a couple hours fielding emails and texts and helping people get the day running in the right direction because we want to catch things and support as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. I was just thinking of how many multitudes of emails I sent you. Like, this is what happened last night. What do I do? We didn't talk about this.
Right.
I love that. I really felt like for the first time we had an expert and a support as part of our team between my husband and I. It really felt just something emotionally for me, felt really alleviated and my anxiety went down.
Good.
Even the second time, the first time, no problem. I'll hire you in a second. The second time I thought, gosh, I should really have this figured out. Like I already have one child. I've already used Brooke. What would she say? Can I channel my inner Brooke? And I honestly, it was like I just needed somebody else who's an expert who does this day in and day out, who can just sit with me and listen and be supportive and encouraging and have sort of a plan.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that one of the most important things is, and a lot of times I hear, oh, you must work with such idiots. Sleep is so easy. And I usually hear this from older generations. I was
going to say,
right. Yeah, right. But what's important is that I work with really, really smart people who know a lot of this content. And I always tell them, listen, I have a master's in early adolescent education and early adolescence in general. I have a teenager now. I have an early adolescent, and I turn to experts with questions because when it's your own child, all of your knowledge and skills and professional background go flying out the window.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that certainly as a therapist, having a first child, I'm like, wait, what? What? Is this a joke? This is really hard. So going back to the developmental pieces, anything that you could share that would maybe, I don't know, give some insight to some of the developmental pieces of having a newborn and maybe what they're ready for and not ready for?
The number one question I get is, when is my baby old enough to sleep train? Because there's so many conflicting answers. And I've heard things 4 months, 14 pounds, 3 months, 12 pounds, all sorts of statistics that are thrown out. And I like to work with more of a developmental picture first, just as you were mentioning. And so I think the important question to answer is not what age my baby is ready, but if they're developmentally ready. And what I'm looking for is, can your baby go from his back to his side and stay there? And I don't mean stay there for 6 hours, but stay there for a moment or two and go back to his back and then maybe go back to the side, or even go from back to belly on his own volition. Because all animals, and when it comes down to it, we are all animals, sleep better on their bellies. And because of AAP and sleep rules, which I follow, we can't have our baby sleeping on their bellies unless they get there on their own volition. So that's a great sign that your baby is ready and more physically mature and neurologically mature to do some motor planning to get them to their sides or to their bellies. Another sign of readiness is a baby who's able to suck on his hands, suck on his fingers, has other ways to self-regulate and self-soothe than you and being held. Because a lot of very young babies need help sleeping because their sensory systems just aren't ready to do it on their own. But when a baby can get frustrated and instantly bring his hand to his mouth and hold it there and actually get some traction and start sucking, then you have a sense of, hey, he has a way to calm himself down. I just saw him do it when he was in the stroller, or I saw him do it when he was on the playmat. So that's a great thing to see. The other piece that's really important to know is that development, while it can help teach you, hey, this is a great time for him to work on sleep, it also works the other way of, whoa, we were doing so well. How come now at 9 months you are going crazy and refusing to nap? Or how come at 18 months you are waking up at 5 a.m. screaming hysterically? Those are developmental leaps. And we see them at 4 months. We see them at 9 months, between 16 and 18 months, and again at 2 years. And if you read the Wonder Weeks or have their app, it's a great sense of kind of mapping out what's going on and why.
I was just about to say that. I was like, what was that app or that book
Yeah.
that had it?
Yeah.
I remember checking, like, surely it's got to be something developmental or
Right.
teething. There's got to be one of those two things.
Yeah.
So, but just a rewind, I think everything you said is awesome. And just for people that may not know, why can't you put a baby on their belly to sleep if they can't do it already on their own?
So the reason why is there's lots of research. It's confusing research, but the American Academy of Pediatrics has decided, and they decided, I would guess, kind of in the mid to late 80s. I don't know the exact date. From what they could see, there was a lower case of SIDS and SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. And they're lower cases when babies sleep on their backs because the airways are clear. It's easier for a baby to breathe. And young babies, it's really the safest place to sleep because there's fewer chance of suffocation. So these are all grim things to think about. And I know that probably in general, most young babies would sleep a lot better if they were on their bellies to begin with, but it's just not safe. And there's been a really, really heart-wrenching story coming out in New Jersey about a mother who lost 3 children, and it's just devastating. And having a safe place for your baby to sleep is just essential.
Wow. She lost 3 children?
Mm-hmm. 3 children. And this is also a socioeconomic argument as well, because not all families are equipped to have a crib in the room or even buy a crib or a bassinet, or they, in order to make ends meet, have to go back to work right away and are so exhausted the only way to sleep is have the baby in bed with them. So there's a lot of really tricky pieces to this picture. But I always tell families, as a sleep professional, I need to tell you the rules. As a parent, you need to follow your rules, and you know what the rules are, and you have to make informed decisions with your partner about what you're doing at home for sleep.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think it's absolutely right on. There's also an element of education, that maybe some parents do not know. I think it's definitely coming out more nowadays about SIDS. And, it just seemed like such an old wives' tale that people could share to scare you. But when you actually do start hearing about it more and more and more, it's horrific. Yeah. And it's just not worth taking the chance.
Yep.
As sleep deprived as you are.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask you was around, you mentioned the hands soothing in the mouth. Mm-hmm. And what, I see sometimes babies with little mittens on and, obviously for nails, not to scratch the face, or they're being wrapped up in, what do they call? Oh God, my baby brain has gone.
Being swaddled?
Yes, swaddled. What do you think about that? If they cannot have access to their hands, do you recommend it? And again, this is just your recommendation. People can take it or leave it. And obviously, you know your child the best as a mom. So what would you say that you've seen in your practice?
So I get a lot of people coming to me saying, I'm really, really confused because my baby loves to be swaddled, but my lactation consultant told me it's terrible to swaddle. Or I get the opposite. I don't want my baby to get addicted to his swaddle, so I'm not swaddling him. Or my baby just doesn't like it. And so I always, first of all, if you're going to swaddle, you need to swaddle safely. And I think one of the concerns is hip dysplasia, and that would be if the swaddle is too tight around the hip area. That doesn't allow for mobility with the hips. So that you want to be careful of. It's also not safe to swaddle once your baby is rolling or moving from side to side, because especially with the rolling, because it's just not safe. However, swaddling calms a baby down. And there are really cool products out there where you can create the hands up by the face, sucking on the hands, but not flying around and whacking themselves. I remember my son just hitting himself awake and thinking, well, what are our options? And there's a great swaddle called the Love to Dream. And I'm not endorsed by any of these things. These are just products that I've found, clients have found for me. And we've all, all mamas come together and say, hey, this is a great thing. Check it out. And this is a really great swaddle where the hands can be up. And so baby's going to have access to his fingers, but they're also covered so they're not whacking him in the face or cutting his nose or little things like that. Also, Ollie swaddle is a great swaddle because you swaddle just below the shoulders. And one of the concerns is a swaddle that slowly creeps up can become dangerous if it gets too close to the mouth.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad you mentioned those for anyone who is interested. And we'll put that in our show notes for people that
Right.
want the link to that. In terms of, all the books I read and going through the process with you, the one thing that stands out to me, and you are the expert, so you tell me, is creating kind of rituals for the evening or for sleep time. Maybe if you could just give us a few tips on what you would suggest, new moms kind of think about as they are trying to encourage their children to sleep.
hmm I think the first thing is to set expectations. Between 0 and 2 months, a baby does not produce enough melatonin, or more importantly, it's just not consistent. So you might want your baby to go to bed at 7 o'clock, and he might not be ready to go to sleep until 11 o'clock. Or you might find at 2 months, he really wants to go to sleep at 7, and you don't want him to because you want him to go to sleep when you do so you can only have to get woken up once for a feeding. So I think it's really working with your baby and when he's really ready to go to sleep. And when you start to find that sweet spot of, okay, maybe it's 10 o'clock at night, maybe it's 7:30, and these aren't permanent times, that's a great time to start a routine. And a routine needs to be simple. You do not need to miss sleepy cues and you don't need to create an overtired baby because you're waiting for your husband to get home from work so he can play the guitar because that's what he does every single night. Don't create routines that are impossible to carry out. Also, don't create routines that are 100% dependent on you. I mean, a lot of times as mothers, we box ourselves in where we are the only one who can put the baby to bed. And if you don't want to do that for the rest of your life, please look at other ways or let somebody else take over bedtime. Because I've been that mom who resents the world because I'm the only one who can put my daughter to bed. And it's not a fun feeling. So routines can be as simple as bath, book, boob or bottle. You can try different iterations of that, different schedules or timing. I love to do the final send off, once you place a baby in his bassinet or crib or maybe a DockATot or wherever he's sleeping, putting him down and doing one last little touch in the crib to signal, even if he's asleep at that point, and then carrying that through months and months and months and even years and years. I also love my one favorite routine that I'm suggesting time and time again is from our beginning 3 or 4 months old, you can start to shut down the room with your baby. So you can, and I stole this from a Music Together class years ago, where you can blow out the lights together. You can lower the shades together. You can, maybe it's put away the toys together with your toddler, but do involved activities that signal the end of the day. And it's essential.
Oh, so many great tips there. So many great tips. And you mentioned sleep cues. What are a few sleep cues for people that don't know what that is?
That's a great question. So in my business, we talk about tired and we talk about sleepy. And I know that those words sound the same, but they're actually, with regards to a young baby, very different. So an infant, meaning 0 to about 3-4 months, needs to go to bed or go down for a nap when he's sleepy. So sleepy cues are spacing out. Maybe he's sitting in your lap looking up at you and he stops looking up at you. And that effort to disconnect cognitively is the way a body self-regulates. It's almost like watching you is too stimulating. So he's trying to not watch you so he can relax. That's a great cue. Another cue is just yawns, like very traditional basic yawns. Some fair-haired babies and fair-skinned babies will get red across the eyebrows. Other babies will get their eyes just start to look a little glassy. Every family has their own thing, and you'll start to notice like, oh my gosh, look, he pulls on his ear just like my other son did. So you'll see little things, ear pulling, hair pulling,
eye rubbing,
all of that. Tired signs are you had all that, and now you're getting some crying. Mm-hmm. Now you're getting, when you pick him up, he's rubbing his face in your shoulder. You start to get some other things where he's really crying, and then you get overtired, which is they were crying and now they're either hysterical or they're maniacally laughing. And you think, oh, I guess you're not tired because you are running around the apartment like crazy, or you are laughing and giggling and hiccuping, and you've really lost any sorts of signs of sleep. So those are some signs.
That's such a good distinction. And so from what I know from you, tell me if you would agree, is that working on the sleep, different things that you do, the blowing out the lights or whatever it is you do, book, bath, bottle, boob, bed, all those things, to do that before you hit the absolutely tired phase or the running around, laughing, screaming phase. You do it when you first see a few cues or one cue. I remember like after the first cue, I was like, that's it, bedtime, done. Let's go.
It's true. It's like a military operation. Right. Like, oh, it's a go. Lights off.
Right.
But I will say a phenomenon that happens constantly is sometimes we have our own personal sleepy cues and our children don't. And so if you are exhausted and have been playing with a 7-month-old baby for the past 2 hours, he might just look the other way. And it's like, oh, you're averting my gaze. You're tired. Great. And you'll go put him down for a nap. And he's like, Mom, I'm not tired at all. So do realize that sometimes your baby's not tired, you are. So also be mindful of time. If he's only been awake for 45 minutes and he's looking in the other direction, he might not be tired. He might just be curious what's going on over there.
That's such a good distinction. Oh, I bet so many women can resonate with that. And so one of the last questions I have for you, Brooke, this has been so awesome. I could spend another hour with you. But if somebody, is looking for someone like you, how do they find the best fit? And then I've also heard stories of people saying like, oh, actually, no, I didn't like that person. Or how do they self-advocate, in learning how to work with sleep consultants? Because it is such a tender subject.
Yes. I offer in my practice a free initial call. And I tell everybody that this is not a sales call at all. I want to make sure that I can help you, and you need to make sure that you can be helped by me. My feelings are never hurt when I hear back, I just don't think this is the right time, or I don't think this is the right fit. That's fine, because I would rather know that now before any money has crossed hands. And now you're in a situation where you've just spent $500 or $200 or $1,000 and it's not going well. You need to make sure that you feel comfortable with this person. And if you had a weird phone call, say, hey, you know what? I'm still trying to make this decision. Could we touch base one more time? You want to make sure you feel really comfortable. And you want to make sure that your emails, even initial emails, are being answered effectively and clearly, and you can communicate well with that person. So that's really important. So don't just sign up for something or buy something until you've had a chance to personally connect with someone, because it is about personality and finding the right fit for you.
Absolutely. And I loved what you said, which I'm going to just echo, is, making sure that your team is ready. Maybe even not, you don't have to be on the same page, but I think there's so much when a baby can be ready, but the parents aren't ready, Yeah. I think there's something about that too.
Yeah. No, I get a lot of phone calls and say, okay, we're ready. Oh yeah. And we're going to China next month. And I'm saying, well, I would wait until you get back from China, or we're ready, but I'm going back to work tomorrow. So you have to also look at stress in your own life and think, is this really a good time? Let me go back to work for a month and see how it sits, and then start working on sleep.
Absolutely.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes. No, but that's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. And so, Brooke, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
So the best way is to find me directly through my website, which is sleepyonhudson.com. And we tried to make the website tired friendly. So you can go on and just click around. On every page, you'll see a little box that says, let's talk. I ask minimal questions just so when we do have an initial phone call, I have some details and we can jump right in. And just reach out. Even if you're not sure if this is for you, I'm happy to chat that. And if you have a quick question, I'm happy to answer it.
Oh, you're awesome, Brooke. Thank you so much for being here today.
This has been so fun. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I'm hoping you got something to take away with you during these often challenging times of having a baby and sleep being a challenge. And if you'd like more support and to join more of an in-depth conversation, you can join our community on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Honest Mamas Community, where these conversations and way more will continue.